In the heart of a bustling African city, Musa is celebrated as the king of Suya, delicious, cheap, and irresistible. Crowds flock to his grill every night, and even the wealthy pay for his famous deliveries. But behind the smoke and spice lies a horrifying secret. Detective Elvis, new to the neighborhood, senses something is wrong and begins to follow Musa. What starts as curiosity quickly turns into a chilling revelation. Musa's empire hides unspeakable horrors. This is the story of deception, terror, and justice in the city's most popular Suya spot. Sit back, relax, and find out what happened in this wonderful story. Musa was not just a Suya vendor, he was a legend in the city. Every evening, as the sun sank behind the skyline and the streets began to glow with neon lights and shop signs, a smoky, tantalizing aroma would drift through the busy junction where he set up his stall. The smell alone could make stomachs growl and eyes water, drawing crowds from all walks of life. Office workers, students, street hawkers, and even the elderly would pause their routines just to get a taste of Musa's famed Suya. People would laugh and chatter, forming long lines in anticipation, and by the time his grill was ready, the place would already be buzzing with hungry customers. "What makes your Suya so soft and cheap, Oga Musa?" asked a young man curiously one evening. Musa puffed out his chest and beamed with pride. "Because I am the greatest and cheapest Suya vendor in this entire city. No one can beat my prices or my taste," he proclaimed, handing over a plate of steaming, perfectly spiced meat for just 200 naira. The crowd laughed and shook their heads in disbelief. Cheap, delicious, and irresistibly soft, Musa's Suya had a charm beyond taste. People came not just for food but for the experience, the excitement, and the pride of eating from the city's most famous vendor. Musa's fame didn't stop at the junction. Wealthy men in the city had begun requesting his Suya via dispatch riders. No matter how far they lived, Musa's Suya reached them fresh, sizzling, and perfectly spiced. He often boasted, "I am untouchable. No one in this city can sell Suya cheaper or better than me." His arrogance was as much a part of him as the smoky aroma of his grill. To the city, he was both a culinary hero and a source of entertainment, his bold claims making him unforgettable. Yet, behind his confident smile, no one suspected that Musa was hiding something dark. His perfection and cheap pricing seemed almost too good to be true. Somewhere in the shadows, a new presence had arrived in the neighborhood. A man whose curiosity and instincts would pierce through Musa's carefully maintained image. Little did the city know that admiration for cheap Suya would soon give way to fear, as the greatest Suya vendor of the city was about to reveal a horrifying secret that would shake everyone who had ever trusted him. Elvis had recently been transferred to the neighborhood as a police detective. Known for his sharp instincts, observant nature, and refusal to accept things at face value, he quickly noticed the commotion one evening at the junction. The smell of smoky, perfectly spiced meat lured him in. He saw crowds of people laughing, chatting, and eagerly waiting for their turn at Musa's stall. There was something magnetic about the place. The energy, the aroma, the speed at which plates disappeared. It was mesmerizing. Curiosity got the better of him, and he approached the stall. "Oga, how much for this Suya?" he asked. Musa, grinning widely, replied, "Just 200 naira, sir. The greatest and cheapest in the city, guaranteed." Elvis raised an eyebrow. 200 naira for such high-quality meat seemed unreal. He bought a plate and took a bite. The Suya was soft, juicy, perfectly seasoned, almost unnaturally so. Something about it unsettled him. It was too perfect, too consistent, almost mechanical in its preparation. A flicker of suspicion stirred in his mind. From that night, Elvis quietly began observing Musa. He watched the dispatch riders racing across the city delivering suya to wealthy clients, the meticulous organization of the stall, and the unwavering loyalty of the customers. There was something hidden beneath Musa's charm, a secret he couldn't yet identify. While the city adored Musa for his affordable, delicious suya, Elvis felt a nagging sense of unease. He decided to keep a careful eye on the so-called Suya King, suspecting that the perfection he displayed might conceal something far darker than anyone imagined. Elvis's curiosity grew with each passing night. Musa moved through the streets with confidence, handling deliveries and customers with ease. But there were inconsistencies: the long, unexplained trips, the mysterious bags, the late-night disappearances, that Elvis could not ignore. He was determined to uncover the truth, even if it meant following Musa into the shadows where no ordinary citizen dared to go. Something was lurking beneath the surface, and Elvis was determined to bring it into the light. Elvis began tailing Musa discreetly, following him on his nightly routes and noting every detail. On the surface, Musa appeared to be a hard-working, friendly man, generous with his customers and precise in his work. But Elvis had learned that appearances could be deceiving. There were patterns in Musa's movements that didn't align with his public persona. Bags and crates often disappeared during late hours, and Musa sometimes left the junction for hours without explanation, returning with a smug satisfaction that hinted at secrets. The detective meticulously recorded every observation. He traced delivery routes, noted the timing of each visit, and observed the customers who placed large orders. The more he watched, the more he realized that Musa's perfection hid something sinister. The city admired him, trusted him, and depended on him, but Elvis felt that admiration masked a darkness that no one had imagined. The seemingly ordinary suya vendor had a secret that needed to be unearthed before anyone else was hurt. Each night, Elvis felt the tension building. He knew that Musa's movements were deliberate, that he had carefully cultivated a facade of innocence while hiding something horrifying. The detective's instincts screamed that tonight or the next would reveal the truth. His determination strengthened with every suspicious detail he recorded. Musa's empire of cheap, soft suya had captured the city's heart, but beneath the surface, it hid an evil that only Elvis was beginning to uncover. The detective's nights were long and exhausting. He hid in shadows, stayed quiet, and observed without drawing attention. He noted the ways Musa handled his employees, the way he received deliveries, and even the subtle ways he avoided scrutiny. Everything pointed to a hidden life, a part of Musa no one else could see. Elvis knew he had to be patient, precise, and ready, for what he was about to uncover could shatter the city and the lives of everyone who trusted Musa. One night, Elvis decided to follow Musa further than he had ever dared. The vendor moved quickly, purposefully, through alleys dimly lit by flickering streetlights. The path was narrow, littered with debris, and overgrown with weeds. The smell of decay mingled faintly with the aroma of grilled meat from the junction. Elvis's pulse quickened. His instincts told him that the night would reveal something extraordinary, possibly horrifying. Musa turned into a particular path lined with derelict houses and boarded-up windows. He stopped in front of a large, abandoned-looking house with a rusted gate. With a key he seemed to know perfectly, Musa unlocked the door and slipped inside. Elvis ducked behind a wall, whispering into his radio, "Back up. I have a suspect at a suspicious location. Possible criminal activity." Shadows flickered on the walls of the alley, and the detective felt a chill run down his spine. Something terrible awaited inside that house. Peering through a small crack, Elvis noticed Musa moving deliberately inside. He seemed focused, almost ritualistic in his actions. The detective's mind raced with possibilities, but no scenario prepared him for what he was about to witness. Every instinct screamed danger, but his commitment to uncovering the truth kept him still, watching, and ready. The night was silent except for distant traffic and the occasional rustle of wind through broken windows. Yet, beneath that quiet, a storm of horror awaited inside the house. Elvis's hands tightened on his gun. The city's greatest suya vendor might not be what he seemed, and the detective braced himself for the discovery that would shatter the illusion of safety and trust the city had in Musa. Through the crack, Elvis saw what he never could have imagined. Musa was handling large chunks of meat, but it was not ordinary suya. Skeletons stacked in corners, blood-stained floors, and freshly butchered human parts lay meticulously arranged on tables. Each movement Musa made was precise, as though he had performed this gruesome task countless times. Horror flooded Elvis's senses, but he forced himself to remain calm. He steadied his gun and radioed for backup. Within minutes, the sound of sirens echoed through the abandoned alley. Police officers quickly surrounded the house, ready for action. Musa, realizing the danger, attempted to flee. But a gunshot grazed his leg, sending him sprawling to the ground. The detective stepped forward, chest tight with fear, anger, and grim relief. Musa, once the beloved Suya king of the city, was a monster. The empire of cheap, soft meat was a facade concealing years of unspeakable crimes. The officers entered the house cautiously, documenting skeletons, hidden journals, and delivery logs that revealed the full extent of Musa's atrocities. The city's trusted vendor had concealed a horrifying secret behind his charm and culinary skill. Elvis, though shaken, felt the weight of justice beginning to settle. Musa's reign of terror, hidden behind the smoke of his grill, was finally coming to an end. Even in the chaos, the detective couldn't help but reflect on the betrayal felt by the city. Families who had trusted Musa, children who had eaten his meat with joy, and wealthy clients who considered his suya a delicacy were all unknowingly exposed to horror. The realization made Elvis's stomach churn, but he knew the nightmare had been uncovered, and the city was finally safe from Musa's deadly secret. Musa was handcuffed and transported to the police station, his injured leg a testament to his failed escape. At first, he refused to speak, his arrogance clinging to him even in the face of exposure. But under intense questioning, the horrifying truth emerged. Musa confessed to targeting vulnerable individuals in the city, using his Suya empire as a cover to satisfy his dark obsession. Each detail revealed was worse than the last. Elvis listened, horrified, as the man he had admired for his culinary skill turned out to be a calculating killer. The city was stunned. How could the man they had trusted, the one who fed them and entertained them, commit such atrocities? Families who had once cheered Musa's cheap, delicious suya were now grieving and shocked. Elvis, though emotionally drained, meticulously documented everything. Musa's confession would ensure that justice could be delivered, but the psychological scars on the city and its people would take much longer to heal. Even behind bars, Musa retained a flicker of his former arrogance. "I am still the greatest," he muttered, weak but defiant. Elvis shook his head. The man who had once inspired admiration now embodied betrayal and horror. Though Musa's reign of terror was over, the city's trust had been shattered, leaving a lingering sense of fear and disbelief. As news spread, people could not reconcile the friendly, charismatic suya vendor they had known with the monster who had lurked in the shadows. Elvis felt the immense responsibility of not only capturing Musa but also helping the city confront the unimaginable truth. The arrest was just the beginning. The repercussions of Musa's crimes would echo through the city for years. The moment Musa's arrest became public, the city was thrown into chaos. Social media, local news, and gossip carried the horrifying story far and wide. People who had lined up for his Suya every night felt betrayed and sick. Mothers questioned the food they had fed their children, wondering what horrors had unknowingly passed their lips. The man who had been celebrated for his generosity and affordable Suya had been hiding a deadly secret all along. Elvis walked the streets, witnessing the aftermath. Conversations stopped as people recognized him. Families whispered in fear, recalling dinners and Suya orders they had enjoyed. Some were angry, some were grief-stricken, and others were numb with disbelief. The beloved Suya King had become a nightmare, leaving an indelible scar on the city. Despite the overwhelming horror, Elvis felt a grim sense of accomplishment. Musa could no longer harm anyone. The police had uncovered the full extent of his crimes, and justice would follow. Yet, the city would take years to recover from the shock. Trust had been broken, and what was once familiar, the aroma of sizzling Suya at the busy junction, was now tainted by fear and betrayal. The night that once symbolized comfort and indulgence now carried the memory of terror. Families who had smiled at Musa's generosity now shivered at the thought of him. Elvis knew that while Musa was behind bars, the emotional impact of his crimes would linger long after. The city's faith in innocence, in the simple joys of life, had been permanently shaken, and the detective carried the heavy responsibility of helping the community come to terms with the unthinkable. After Musa's arrest, the police began a meticulous investigation into his Suya empire. What initially seemed like a simple street food business turned out to be a chillingly organized network. Every detail mattered. Delivery records, ledgers, and hidden compartments revealed the extent of his deception. Dispatch riders who delivered Musa's Suya across the city were interviewed. Some were oblivious, simply delivering meat as instructed. Others had been coerced into complicity, their fear of Musa ensuring silence. Elvis spent countless nights analyzing every transaction, tracing every delivery route, and identifying victims. Each layer peeled back more darkness. Musa had cultivated trust, manipulated admiration, and exploited innocence with calculated precision. Customers who had once lined up happily now became pieces in a horrific puzzle, the joy of cheap Suya hiding a sinister truth. As the detective dug deeper, he realized that Musa had used his reputation as a shield for years, hiding unspeakable acts behind laughter, smoke, and spice. The investigation also revealed how Musa had meticulously planned his killings. His cheap Suya wasn't just a lure, it was the perfect cover, blending seamlessly with a bustling city that never questioned him. Elvis worked tirelessly, mapping every known detail, from storage houses to delivery schedules, ensuring no stone was left unturned. The magnitude of the crimes left him sleepless at night. Despite the horror, Elvis felt a sense of purpose. The city had been betrayed, but now the truth was emerging. Every journal entry, every hidden compartment, every witness testimony was a step closer to full justice. The detective knew that the city's healing depended on exposing the full truth and bringing all those involved, directly or indirectly, to account. Musa's empire was crumbling, and the nightmare he had created was finally being confronted head-on. One of the hardest parts of the investigation was confronting the families of the victims. Some were reported missing, while others had been quietly mourning loved ones who never returned home. Each visit was emotionally taxing. Faces etched with grief, eyes brimming with tears, and hearts heavy with unanswered questions stared back at Elvis. Some shouted accusations, others fell silent, and some clung to hope that he might be mistaken. Elvis carefully explained the horrifying truth, knowing the magnitude of the revelations. The reactions were a mixture of disbelief, anger, and devastation. Mothers and fathers wept openly, unable to comprehend that the person who fed their children or provided the city with cheap suya had been behind such atrocities. The detective's own chest tightened at the sheer pain reflected in their eyes. As he listened to each story, the weight of responsibility grew heavier. Each family represented a victim silenced too soon, a life ended for reasons beyond comprehension. Elvis reassured them that justice was underway and that Musa would face the full weight of the law. But he knew that no trial could erase the psychological scars or restore the lives lost. Despite the grief, there was a glimmer of resolve. The families demanded justice, and Elvis felt determined to see it through. Every diary, receipt, and witness account had to be examined. Musa's empire, which had seemed invincible, was being dismantled piece by piece, and the detective knew that transparency and accountability were the only way for the city to begin healing. The trial was a city spectacle. News vans, reporters, and the public filled the courtroom to capacity. Musa, handcuffed and limping from his gunshot wound, appeared calm but distant, his arrogance faintly lingering in his eyes. The charges were read aloud. Multiple counts of murder, human trafficking, and fraud. Gasps and murmurs filled the room as the sheer magnitude of his crimes sank in. Witnesses recounted chilling tales of missing people, suspicious deliveries, and strange disappearances. Police officers described the grisly discovery in the abandoned house, with skeletons, blood-stained floors, and hidden ledgers exposing the full horror of Musa's actions. Evidence was undeniable, photographic and physical, leaving no room for doubt. Musa's own demeanor gradually faltered as details emerged. His once proud aura crumbled under the weight of proof. Elvis watched silently, noting the reactions of families in the courtroom. Shock, grief, and anger filled the gallery, a collective acknowledgement of betrayal and horror. Even as the trial continued, Musa attempted to justify his actions. "I provided the city with the best suya at the cheapest price," he said coldly, attempting to maintain his bravado. The courtroom erupted. No explanation could account for the horror he had caused. The city's former suya king now faced the reality of consequences he had long evaded. Musa's lawyer argued insanity, claiming that his client lacked awareness of the magnitude of his actions. But the evidence painted a different picture. Musa spoke in court with unnerving calmness, attempting to rationalize his killings and protect his reputation as the city's greatest suya vendor. "I did what I had to do to maintain my empire," he said, voice steady. Families of victims reacted with fury, shouting accusations and crying out for justice. The courtroom became a battlefield of emotions, shock, grief, anger, and disbelief intertwined. Elvis remained stoic, witnessing the unraveling of a man who had once commanded admiration. The city had loved him, and now they hated him. Psychologists and forensic experts provided testimony, showing that Musa's actions were deliberate, methodical, and planned. The defense's attempt to claim insanity faltered under the weight of facts. Musa's arrogance, meticulous planning, and systematic execution confirmed that he had been fully aware of his actions. By the end of the day, the courtroom atmosphere was thick with tension. The city's beloved vendor, once a symbol of pride and affordability, was now exposed as a monster. Elvis felt the relief of progress but understood the road to justice was far from over. As the trial progressed, evidence against Musa continued to grow. Forensic analysis revealed DNA matches from the butchered remains to missing persons, solidifying the prosecution's case. Dispatch riders were questioned thoroughly, revealing that while some had been innocent, others had been coerced into compliance out of fear. Every new piece of evidence illustrated Musa's meticulous and horrifying planning. Elvis watched from the courtroom, noting the emotional reactions of the families. The revelation of the full extent of Musa's crimes was gut-wrenching. Each photograph, each logbook entry, each witness testimony added weight to the charges. The detective felt the burden of responsibility but also a grim sense of justice unfolding. The city, following the trial closely, was captivated by the details. People who had once celebrated Musa's cheap Suya now recoiled in horror. News outlets provided constant coverage, and social media was filled with stories of disbelief and outrage. The magnitude of betrayal was overwhelming. Musa, once untouchable, began to show cracks. His once proud demeanor faltered under scrutiny. The realization that the city's admiration had masked horror hit him gradually. Elvis knew that while justice was being served, the psychological damage to the city would linger far beyond the courtroom. As the trial neared its conclusion, tension in the courtroom was palpable. Witnesses had testified, evidence had been presented, and experts had confirmed the meticulous cruelty behind Musa's actions. The city waited anxiously for the verdict, emotions running high. Families of the victims sat in silent anticipation, eyes fixed on the defendant who had caused them unimaginable pain. Musa remained mostly silent, his bravado replaced by an uneasy tension. He knew the evidence was insurmountable. Elvis observed quietly, aware that the final verdict would determine whether justice would truly be served. The detective also understood that this moment was more than a legal milestone. It was a symbolic reckoning for a city betrayed. The judge reviewed the evidence one final time, detailing the crimes and their devastating impact on the community. Musa's calculated actions, the scale of his empire, and the psychological trauma inflicted on families were highlighted, leaving no doubt about the severity of his crimes. When the courtroom finally awaited the verdict, the air was thick with anticipation. Families gripped each other, some weeping quietly, some bracing themselves for closure. The city's Suya king, once celebrated, now faced the full weight of justice. The judge delivered the verdict. Musa was found guilty on all counts. The sentence was severe, reflecting the gravity and calculated nature of his crimes. Multiple life sentences were handed down, ensuring he would never harm another person. Gasps and cries filled the courtroom. Relief and sorrow mixed among the families. Musa's eyes widened as the verdict sank in. The arrogance and pride that once defined him were gone, replaced with disbelief and terror. Elvis watched silently, feeling the weight of the city's pain and the relief that justice had been done. The nightmare was finally over, but its echoes would remain. The courtroom emptied slowly, families hugged, tears flowing freely, finally able to begin the slow process of healing. The city's faith in its institutions was restored slightly, even as the horror of Musa's crimes left a permanent scar. Musa, handcuffed and subdued, was led away. His empire, built on cheap Suya and trust, was destroyed. The man who had once been untouchable was now powerless, a lesson in the consequences of unchecked ambition and hidden evil. The city struggled to recover. The junction where Musa had once sold Suya was quiet, the smell of smoke replaced by memories of betrayal. Families tried to move on, holding on to hope for the future. Elvis, though proud of the justice served, could not forget the faces of the victims or the family's grief. Counseling services and community support programs were introduced. People began to gather not to celebrate Suya but to rebuild trust. The nightmare Musa had created left scars, but slowly, the city learned to reclaim its streets and its sense of safety. Elvis reflected on the journey. One man's greed, pride, and hidden darkness had terrorized the city for years. Yet through vigilance, courage, and persistence, justice prevailed. The story of Musa became a cautionary tale, a reminder that evil can hide behind charm and trust, but truth, patience, and determination will always expose it. The city remembered the horror but also learned resilience. Mothers, children, and citizens reclaimed their nights. The junction smelled again of ordinary food, ordinary life, and ordinary trust, proof that even after darkness, healing was possible. This story reminds us that appearances can be deceiving. Not everything that seems good and trustworthy is truly innocent. Vigilance, courage, and truth are the only shields against hidden evil, and justice will always find a way to uncover it. If you have watched till this moment, please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe for more powerful and touching stories with lessons like this. Until next time, stay safe, stay real.